Tony Stewart has yet again threatened NASCAR, but this time it seems like he means business. His team was heavily penalized after Charlotte Motor Speedway, and his verdict on this entire scenario will likely change everything in NASCAR. Furthermore, he spoke about the charters yet again. And with him receiving the support of Denny Hamlin, another team co-owner, it is safe to say that NASCAR's future is doomed if the sport doesn't implement what one of the most important people in the sport is asking from them. Join us as we go through the voyage of Tony Stewart and his latest rant against NASCAR, as well as the consequences that his statements will have on the sport. Tony Stewart is by far one of the most controversial figures in the world of NASCAR. However, he has been able to be more than the center of attention lately thanks to his team being penalized for the illegal parts during the Charlotte Motor Speedway race, one that saw a hefty fine of $250,000, docking 120 regular season points and 25 playoff points, and further penalizing the crew chief John Klausmeyer for 6 races. It is definitely one of the biggest penalties that NASCAR has handled in recent history, and if you think that it's given to Tony's team, you definitely expect a fierce reaction from the owner of the SRX series. When talking about this matter, he had one thing that just didn't seem to be sitting right with him, as he went on to elaborate. Honestly, I'm supportive of the amount of fines. I think if you want to get it under control, you've got to keep bumping it up to where it's risk versus reward. What are you willing to risk to get in the gray areas? I support NASCAR on that side. I feel like they've done a good job of trying to discourage teams from going above and beyond. But the mindset on some of these aspects are absolutely ludicrous. Some of these penalties have been justified, and some of them, I feel like, have been extremely in poor judgment. But it's not our series. We're not the sanctioning body. They have to run the series the way they feel like it needs to be run. While NASCAR's penalties keep the integrity of the sport at the highest level, and this was certainly proven by the fact that Stewart did not appeal the penalty that was handed to his driver, Chase Briscoe, it goes to show that a team could easily go either bankrupt or with a thinned-down piggy bank, which would then automatically apply on the performance of the car on the track. This is why one of the main talking points in today's NASCAR era is the charters, ones that Tony feels should be made permanent and without any renewals. And while there are many experts that feel that if the charters are made permanent, it would backlash on the owners, Stewart has a very strong opinion on this matter. The thing is, the team owners make a very small amount of profit as things stand right now. 25% of the cake is definitely not enough, considering that they have to bring in around 70 to 80% of the funding from sponsorships, a thing that might be easier said than done. We've seen the departure of M&M from JGR, and we've also seen that it's practically impossible for a driver to find a sponsor if the team he drives for does not have any potential to win races and be competitive in the near future. This is why Tony Stewart feels that the charters need to be made permanent. And if the scenario sees daylight, he reckons that the popularity of the sport and the financial benefits that NASCAR would see from this move would be through the roof. When talking about this matter, he backlashes NASCAR yet again for their nonsense move of not even wanting to talk about the potential that this move could have on the future of the sport, as he went on to add, "The idea that NASCAR don't want to give permanent charters I think is ludicrous. For somebody that wants to invest in the sport, why would you invest in something and not have security of knowing that your investment is somewhat secure? We, meaning team owners, hold all the risks. We're the ones that have to go out and secure sponsorship to put these cars on the racetrack, and to sit there and have a sanctioning body not support that and want to support us from the charter standpoint, I just think it's asinine. I'm sure they've got their reasons, and I'll respect their reasons but may not agree with them at all times." Stewart furthermore said that if the charters are not made permanent, the longevity of the sport will take a massive hit, and there are going to be a lot of eyes on that decision by people who are making decisions about whether they want to invest in the sport or not. Quite frankly, it was already very hard to generate profit and attract investors in today's NASCAR era, and many fans are blaming the leadership of the sport for putting someone who hasn't raced a day in NASCAR to lead the sport, as they believe that it will ultimately lead NASCAR to its own demise. But truth be told, NASCAR owns the majority of the racetracks, and the 15% that the France family is directly taking from the pie is definitely not the only one that they are taking from the sport. What this effectively means is that, for example, the profits that are bound to go to the Daytona 500, one of the tracks NASCAR owns, are ending up in a large portion in NASCAR's back pocket, resulting in them banking much larger profits than you'd originally anticipate. To top this off, the teams are now struggling with bringing in sponsorships, Because if you are to invest in NASCAR and you see this business model being presented to you, we doubt highly that you'd be very excited to put a couple of $1 million into a NASCAR team. The current business model is something that Tony Stewart fiercely spoke against, and he is not the only one who has shared the opinion of making the sport a more profitable and enjoyable place for future investors. Another team owner, Denny Hamlin, has sided with Tony Stewart on this matter and said that this is one of the main reasons why their sport is looked at as the black sheep in USA economics right now, as he went on to add, "No one from the outside will ever invest in the sport unless it's permanent. Because if you have, let's just say, Mark Cuban wanted to invest in NASCAR, he would say, so let me get this straight. I've got to spend tens of millions on a franchise that can be taken away from me at any moment? Well, that's just stupid." It goes on without saying that this may force team owners to sell their teams, or at least stakes in their franchises, to other investors. And while the current business model is up for renewal along with the media and TV rights at the end of the 2024 season, it's definitely something that will be brought up more frequently in the upcoming period as well. With how NASCAR is treating its team owners, one couldn't help but wonder whether the leadership has any vision for the future of the sport and whether or not a split is the only realistic option for NASCAR right now. While the split might seem like a bad idea, with how the popularity of SRX has arisen in the past couple of years, you could put out the argument that if all team owners arise together thanks to the RTA, they can very well get out of this monopoly game led by NASCAR and form their own league. After all, they have all the knowledge, all the equipment, and with their expertise in finding sponsorships so far in this cruel business model for NASCAR, I highly doubt that they'll have any issue navigating their way through the rest of the details of forming their own league. Of course, this would be heavily hampered by the fact that NASCAR is the body that owns the majority of the tracks on the calendar, so it would be kind of impossible for them to let the RTA race on their own soil. But look at what is happening with the SRX right now. Tony Stewart is using NASCAR's equipment and is still not dependent on them in any way whatsoever. And if this doesn't come up sooner rather than later, there will come a time in which the team owners are just not going to be able to support their teams anymore and will be forced to sell minority stakes in their teams. A move that was recently done by JGR and supported by Tony Stewart. Obviously, the future is not very bright for NASCAR, and the France family doesn't even want to have a proper conversation about the ongoing issues, which only goes to show that we are going to see massive changes as the RTA is not ready to back down from their own wishes and demands. After boycotting the quarterly meeting, who knows what the next move is from the team owners. But with NASCAR continuing with the hefty penalties and not wanting to hear anything about renewal of the business model or making the charters permanent, it's going to cost them a lot of fortune, one that might not be reversible in the near future.